Welcome back, everyone, to another late-night deep dive right here on the For the Wise podcast. I am so glad you're joining us. Go ahead and grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and hey, before we get too deep into tonight's explainer, please take a quick second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps us keep these late-night sessions going for you. And as always, keeping us company over here is our very cozy mascot, Hakeem the Owl. Look at him, just perched perfectly on that stack of pressed wool legal files. He is ready to go, and I think we are too.
So let's just get right into it, because tonight's central mystery is something so many of us have wrestled with in the quiet, anxious hours of the night. Why do we stay in toxic dynamics when all the objective evidence is practically screaming at us to walk out the door? Well, we're going to unpack a truly brilliant concept today, and it all centers around this idea of evidence tampering. Now, when we think of evidence tampering, we usually picture these high-stakes court cases, bad faith actors shredding documents, right? But what if I told you that in a toxic relationship, the exact same thing is happening, but it's happening entirely inside your own head?
Section 1. The trial in your head.
I want you to think of your mind as a courtroom. In a healthy dynamic, your internal courtroom is just. It looks at the facts, weighs them fairly, and renders a verdict to keep you safe. But in a toxic dynamic, things go totally off the rails. Your internal defense attorney, the exact part of your brain that is supposed to be looking out for you, goes rogue. It literally crosses the aisle and starts working for the other side. Your perception gets hijacked. Think about how a glowing crimson thread can get completely tangled up against a piece of rough mulberry paper. That tangled thread, that is your perception of reality getting knotted up. You can no longer make a fair, objective judgment about your own safety or happiness because the facts are being deliberately obscured by your own mind.
Section 2. Meet your internal saboteurs.
Let's move along and see how this builds, because it's time to meet the culprits. Toxic dynamics do not just persist because the other person is difficult. They persist because of 4 specific internal saboteurs that actively tamper with the facts just to maintain a very painful status quo. Saboteur number 1 is what we call blind goodwill, otherwise known as the potential trap. This is the absolute ultimate form of evidence tampering. You look right at the hard evidence, the incredibly hurtful behavior, and you completely ignore it. Instead, you replace it with what you think they intended to do, or who they could be. You tell yourself things like, they didn't mean to hurt me, they just had a really hard childhood. We have all been there, but the cost of this? You end up treating a recurring, damaging pattern as if it is just a one-off accident. Next up is emotional amnesia. And what's really fascinating here is just witnessing our brain's sheer survival instincts in action. In high-stakes, stressful dynamics, your brain actively suppresses the lows just so you can get through the day. It is exactly like a court clerk, conveniently misplacing the thick files of every terrible argument you have ever had. When things are briefly calm, you quite literally cannot recall the intense, searing pain you felt just 48 hours prior. Now, if we look at how this plays out over a timeline, let's say month 3, year 5, year 10. Because of emotional amnesia, the present moment always feels somewhat safe. You look at today and think, see, we're having a nice morning coffee, everything is fine. But the entire history of the timeline is dangerous. It's an absolute minefield. I can actually see Haken tilting his little button eyes with fragile worry over there. It's okay, buddy. It is a tough reality to face, but honestly, seeing it laid out like this is the absolute first step to breaking the cycle.
Then we've got the third saboteur, the sunk cost fallacy. Picture a really stressed internal auditor in your head slamming their fist on the desk, insisting that because you have invested 5 or 10 years into this person, you absolutely cannot afford to lose that investment by leaving. The sabotage here is framing an exit as a failure. But you know what? It's not a failure, it is a recovery. If you listen to this auditor, you just end up spending even more of your precious life trying to fix an entirely bankrupt relationship.
And finally, our 4th saboteur, over-responsibility, also known as the fixer complex. This one convinces you that you are the lead investigator, the judge, and the jury for the other person's problems. You start believing that if you could just find the absolute perfect words or exactly the right tone of voice, their toxic behavior would magically stop, right, Hakeem? Man, we have all been there. But the devastating cost here is that you take the blame for their actions, which effectively acquits them of all wrongdoing in your mental courtroom.
Section 3. The price of dissonance.
When we let these 4 saboteurs run our internal courtroom, the price we pay is profound. It goes way beyond just lost time or lost energy. We pay a massive psychological toll. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding cognitive dissonance. When you hold 2 diametrically opposed truths in your mind at the exact same time, like this person loves me, right next to this person hurts me, it creates an exhausting, massive psychological strain. Your brain hates this friction. It wants to resolve the dissonance at literally any cost.
And that leads us perfectly to this incredibly powerful quote from the source material. We often choose to believe the lie because the truth requires a terrifying level of change. To resolve that intense mental strain, we gladly accept the tampered evidence. We accept the excuses, the amnesia, the sunk costs. And why? Because facing the objective truth means we have to actually do the terrifying, agonizing work of packing up and walking away.
Section 4. How to protect evidence. All right, here is the good news. You do not have to stay tangled up in this. To stop the internal evidence tampering, you just have to start treating your life like a neutral, third-party investigator would. It is time to pull that tangled crimson thread perfectly straight. There are 3 concrete, incredibly effective strategies to move away from subjective feelings, which, as we've learned, are super easily manipulated, and move toward cold, hard, objective data. Let's walk through the black box method, the mirror test, and establishing non-negotiable exhibits.
First up is the black box method. Because your memory is the very first thing your saboteurs will tamper with, you have to create an external record. This completely counters emotional amnesia and blind goodwill. I want you to keep a private log, whether that's on your phone, in a notebook, wherever you want. Record just 3 things: the date, the event, and how you felt. When your saboteur pops up and says, "Oh, last week wasn't that bad," you pull out the hard data. And the absolute golden rule here: never, ever delete an entry. This is your untamperable evidence.
Second is the mirror test. You see, internal saboteurs thrive in the dark. They thrive in isolation. They absolutely crumble when you bring the evidence out into the light. So take a situation you are currently making excuses for and describe it to a trusted friend, but swap the roles. Say something like, "Hey, my friend's partner just did X, Y, and Z to them. What do you think?" Hearing yourself describe the behavior as happening to someone else breaks the spell of the fixer complex instantly. Because look, if you would be rightly outraged for your friend, you absolutely should be outraged for yourself.
Third, you need to establish your non-negotiable exhibits. In a real court, some evidence is so instantly damning that it just ends the trial on the spot. You need a deal-breaker list. Try to list 3 to 5 behaviors that represent an immediate contempt of court. This could be name-calling, gaslighting you about your reality, or even financial manipulation. These are your absolute hard no's. And here is the real key to enforcing those deal-breakers. Do not litigate the why. Once a deal-breaker happens, the trial is over. Whether it happened because of their childhood trauma, or stress at work, or just because they had a bad day, it is entirely irrelevant. The only fact that actually matters is that a non-negotiable boundary was crossed. Case closed.
Section 5. The final cross-examination. All right, we have gathered our objective facts, and I can see Hakeem has softened up nicely, tucking his beak right into his mustard yellow scarf. He knows we have got this handled now. Notice what happens when we put the lies side by side with the truth. When the saboteur argues, "Oh, they were just having a bad day," the objective evidence cross-examines with, "This is the 4th bad day this week." When the saboteur says, "I should have been more patient," the objective evidence calmly replies, "My patience did not cause their toxic behavior."
And as we continue the cross-examination, the saboteur pleads, but they promised it would never happen again. The objective evidence notes, they made this exact same promise on October 12th. And when the saboteur practically begs, underneath it all, they are a good person, the objective evidence firmly states, I am currently suffering from their actions in the real world, not their hidden inner self.
Which brings us to our most powerful takeaway from this explainer. You cannot think your way out of a toxic dynamic using the same logic that kept you in it. You simply can't. The courtroom in your head is completely compromised. The only way to win the case for your own well-being is to move the evidence out of your head and into the real world where it simply cannot be tampered with. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up. What piece of evidence will you finally move out of your head and into reality today? Write it down, speak it out loud, protect your case. Thank you all so much for hanging out with Hakeem and me for this late-night chat. If this explainer helped untangle some things for you, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the For the Wise podcast. It truly means the world to us. Stay wise, stay objective, and we will see you on the next deep dive. Good night, everyone.